Welcome to Lecture 6, Fake News. And what we're going to look at today is particularly how narratives can be used to provide us with fake news that actually then sway political thinking. So how we are perhaps deceived, so that we believe certain facts about the political situation that we may face. So, what is fake news? The link here, if you go on to Moodle, you'll find that you can actually download these slides, and this link takes us to a short video from the Independent newspaper which details these fake news awards that Donald Trump gave out in 2018. And essentially they are to all of the media outlets that Donald Trump says are fake news. So that is particularly CNN and pretty much anybody in America who is not Fox News or the New York, not the New York Times, the New York Journal, I think it is, which is like a red top tabloid here in the UK. And Fox News is also of that sort of similar ilk, in as much as they are newspapers that have previously tended to deal in celebrity news. So let's carry on with fake news. So what's the difference between fake news and satire? And satire is something that we see a great deal of at the moment, although there is a very thin line between what is satirical and what is completely fake. And also, as we're seeing currently, there's a very thin line between real news and satire, and an awful lot of the news that we are hearing about on an almost daily basis, had it have appeared 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago, people would have said that this can't possibly be truthful. So, for example, I'm sure most of you have seen the Back to the Future films. There is a scene in one of the Back to the Future films, I think it's either the first or the second, where the Doc says to, somehow in conversation, Michael J. Fox and the Doc end up talking about who the American president is. And Michael J. Fox's character says it's Ronald Reagan, and the Doc can't believe this because he says, but he's an actor. How can an actor be the president? So, you know, if you now sort of transpose that to 2016, and people even suggesting, or 2015, people suggesting that a reality TV star could end up as the 45th American president. You know, it seems almost ludicrous, but here we are. And it could be that by the time you watch this video, because I'm recording this on Thursday the 29th of October, it could be that by next Tuesday we will know, or maybe by next Wednesday, we might know that there could well be a different American president. So yeah, that idea of whether things are satirical, quite ludicrous, or actual truth is something that is very difficult to actually judge these days. So this particular image here, taken from the BBC's news website in 2018, shows a mistake that the UK government made, because this particular poster this image appeared, as it says in the text underneath, the image appeared in a magazine for civil servants in a feature on the history of government communications. But if you look closely at the picture there, the central image, if you suspect your child has rabies, don't hesitate, shoot, it could save a life. You know, that clearly wasn't a real poster. However, the colouring, the typeface, and the tone is very much the reality of posters from the 70s. And the poster that you can see part of, which appears to be somebody pregnant and sort of leaning back with one hand on their belly, and says underneath, "Would you be more careful if it was you that got pregnant?" I believe that actually was a real poster. So this image came from, as it says underneath, originally produced by the fictional Scar Folk Council, whose Twitter account parodies town life that did not progress beyond 1979. So if you've come across Scar Folk Council, you'll know that they have a particular line in very scary posters and quite ridiculous but quite chilling sort of news stories. And it's very much echoing the news stories of the tone and of public information films and posters from the 70s. So it's quite understandable that people might be taken in with this because it looks authentic. And as I say, you know, the government admits that yeah, they were taken in. So it's easy to get taken in by fake news, but you know, this was satire. So the intention wasn't to actually deceive, but to entertain. And that is the sort of the line. Fake news intends to deceive. Satire is there to entertain. So Michael Toolan is the person that we really turn to for this idea about narrative as a political action, and the chapter that this particular quote is drawn from is available on Moodle, and it's also the entire book is available as an ebook from the library, so you know, you can go and have a look and see what Michael Toolan has said. So if we have a look at this this section here, so a narrative is never without contexts which both shape and come to be shaped by the story that is told and heard. Contexts may be put in the plural for the too often neglected reason that the teller and addressees of a narrative may assume quite different grounds for a particular tale being told, and may separately deduce rather different morals or consequences. So let's unpack that a little more. So a narrative is never without contexts. Okay, so this is essentially when and where and why something has been told. So remember, we looked at narrative last week, and narrative is the way that something is told, but also it can be used as it is being here. It's being used in the same way that we might use the word story. So a narrative, a story is never without the context. So that means that if we hear a story about I don't know, somebody being rescued from a tall building, if we don't know the context, you know, why they got there, where the story comes from, you know, who they were rescued by, and so on. If we don't know all of the other details, then we may well very easily take that story out of context and read perhaps the wrong things into it. You know, we may take additional connotations which perhaps weren't there in the original context. So this is where often you hear celebrities and politicians who will say, you know, oh, you can't, yes, I did say that particular phrase, but you've taken it out of context. So the context shapes and comes to be shaped by the story that is told and heard. So, you know, we need to know what was going on around something. And this is very true when it comes to looking at fake news. If we suspect something is fake, we need to find out the context. When was this said? Are we sure who said it? Which particular media outlet is putting this out there? So that next section, contexts, may be put in the plural for the too often neglected reason that the teller and addressees of a narrative may assume quite different grounds for a particular tale being told and may separately deduce rather different morals or consequences. So this is where we have to actually find out who is telling us this. Why might they be telling us this? So, if it's a particular media outlet that has a reputation for having a political bias towards the left or towards the right, their grounds for telling us this particular story may be to try and discredit the person that the story is about. And that may or may not end up sort of blowing back on them and sort of exploding perhaps in the wrong way that they had anticipated. And that's the thing, the addressee, the audience of the narrative, us, when we hear about it, we may have completely different ideas about what we're being told. So you may remember some months ago, it feels like years, but 2020 seems to have gone on for at least a decade. Some months ago, I think it was the beginning of the year, which feels like about 9 years ago. There was a news story that came out about the leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, and about how he had purchased some land alongside the house where his mother lives. And this land has been now used and turned into a donkey sanctuary because his mother apparently really loves donkeys. So when this story broke, some of the more right-wing press, those newspapers that have a bias towards the right wing and against the left wing, they had put the story out very much to attempt to criticise Sir Keir Starmer and to make it seem that this was, a ridiculous purchase. But actually the reverse happened, and instead an awful lot of people thought that this was a really lovely thing for him to have done. And, as I say, the takeaway from most of the audience was very much, well, actually, this is a nice thing, and not, as the newspaper had hoped, people weren't critical of him. And actually, I realised that I have mentioned right wing and left wing and haven't actually further explained that. Those of you who are taking LL 537, which is Language in the Media 2, next term, we will get into this whole notion of left and right wing and which newspapers fall into those brackets. But essentially, something that is right wing stands on the right hand side of the political spectrum, and right wing politics tends to be the extreme right wing ends up with fascism. That's the extreme. Extreme left wing politics ends up with communism. So fascism, right wing, communism, left wing, and they are the opposite ends of the spectrum. And as we move sort of closer towards the middle, then we start to see political parties like in America, the Republican Party, which is also referred to as the GOP, which stands for the Good Old Party, which is, that's who Donald Trump stands for. He is part of the Republican Party. And in the UK, that would then be, the equivalent would be the Conservative Party. And Other political parties in the UK that are on the right wing are also the Brexit Party, UKIP, and then some of those parties, like some of those that are sort of now have been outlawed, some of them, or don't exist anymore, like the BNP, so the British National Party, and as I say, very much that sort of far right, the closer it gets to fascism. Right-wing parties tend to be, not exclusively, but they tend to be very much conservative with a small c. So, and what I mean by that is conservative with a large C is the Conservative Party name, title. Conservative with a small c, adjective, and essentially meaning somebody or a party that wants to keep things the way they have always been and don't particularly want a great deal of change. And that notion of keeping things the way they are means that it tends to be conservative parties, right-wing parties, tend to want to have a system whereby the patriarchy is maintained. So men go out to work, women stay home and look after children and the home and cook and so on and so forth. And that anyone who transgresses, shall we say, in inverted commas, from that norm, that meta-narrative that has been in place for a considerable length of time in Western society. So the idea of the sort of the nuclear family of mother, father, 2.4 children, and as I say, the father being the breadwinner, the one going out to work, the mother being the one at home doing the child rearing and caring for the home, cooking and so on. And maintaining that heteronormative tradition, that meta-narrative of society. And as we start to sort of move towards the left, obviously, as I say, the extreme left wing is communism and the Communist Party. As we sort of step back and move towards the middle ground, the central ground, we then have parties in the UK like the Labour Party. And as we get more central, we also have the Liberal Democrats. And in the United States, if we were to move right into the centre, and in some respects even move towards the right, then we have the Democrat Party. And this is the thing to remember, is that socialism is part of the left wing, and that notion of socialism, particularly in the UK and even more so in Northern Europe, the notion of socialism is a very positive one. If you speak if you speak about socialism in, as I say, particularly Northern Europe and the Scandinavian countries, it has lots and lots of very positive connotations. Whereas and in the UK, it has positive connotations, reasonably positive connotations. But if you mention even the word socialism and socialist in American circles, or in America, then the connotations are quite different. So that notion has been, to some extent, decontextualized from its original setting of socialism being, about and for the people. One of the reasons why there is some misunderstanding about this word socialism, which, as I say, we see on the left side of politics, is because from 20th century history we have the Nazi Party, that rose to power in the first half of the 20th century, and in Germany, and that Party was actually, so Nazi is a contraction from the National Socialist Party. Now, National Socialism and socialism are two completely different things. The key point here is to remember that notion of national and nationalism. So, nationalism very much being tied to a country, and beyond being proud of where people come from, beyond that, the whole sort of nationalistic impulse, particularly when it's in a right wing setting, and that, as I say, is National Socialism, the Nazi Party, is very much that it's a sort of a jingoistic sort of more than patriotism. It's that this is, whichever country they're referring to, this is the best country in the world, and anybody who is not 100% from this country is therefore lesser and other, and not as good as us. So it's quite tribal, and that whole notion of nationalism has an awful lot in common with sports supporters, but particularly football supporters. And this is no criticism of football, the game, but particularly in the UK, and not just the UK, but again, quite a lot of Northern European football fans. We have, certainly in the UK, we have a very long and very awful history of football hooliganism, to the sort of through the 70s and 80s, and sort of continuing, but to the point that at certain times over the last sort of 30-40 years, British football teams and British football fans have been very much identified as hooligans who have been banned from travelling abroad, and have been responsible for a great deal of racist attacks. And this whole notion of tribalism, my team is better than yours, that sort of thing. Excuse me. But even more than just a simple "it's a game," more than that, sort of very much embedded this sort of almost binary tribalism. You are a winner or you're a loser. You are with us or you're against us. The same sort of binary that we see or have seen with sort of Donald Trump. And, Donald Trump, of course, has that slogan of MAGA, Make America Great Again. And also, other slogans that go with it, which also echo an awful lot of sort of tribalistic football slogans, so the sort of lock her up, that thing. And we have that in the UK as well. We've had that with Brexit, and the whole thing of you lost, get over it, and Brexit means Brexit. And we're still seeing some of that sort of very simple sloganising of things like eat out to help out, that type of thing, which actually tends to make quite complex ideas very simplistic, and that's not necessarily a good thing. So why am I mentioning all of this? Because this ties into this whole idea of narrative as political action, that we need to understand what the context is that's in the background, and why do we have a simplification of an awful lot of very complicated and complex ideas. Why do we have it simplified? And it used to be, a few years ago, it used to be called dumbing down. Why does that go on? Why do we have dumbing down? Why do we have an oversimplification of things to very short slogans? And, then in turn, what does that do when we have short, simplistic slogans? because those slogans need unpacking. And if we're going to try and identify fake news from real news, and also if we're just going to read the news and the media, if we're going to read it critically, we need to be able to unpack and contextualise what it is we are seeing and what it is we are hearing. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause there. Do go and have a look at the Toolen, which, as I say, is on Moodle, and there's an e-copy in the library. And we'll come back in a moment.